These two black twin brothers vanished on a cruise ship. They had a suitcase with them, which washed up to the shore 6 months after their disappearance, shedding light on how they truly vanished. David and Daniel Lawson, identical twins with identical bright eyes, were the only black students in Linden Heights Academy, a prestigious private school famous for its flawless lawns, expensive blazers, and families with last names engraved on park benches. No one expected much from the new boys that first day. In fact, some expected trouble, others expected shyness, and a few even expected failure. What they got instead was brilliance. Within 2 weeks, the Lawson twins were the talk of every hallway. Their classworks looked like it was pulled straight out of college textbooks. Their manners were gentle yet confident. They greeted teachers with soft smiles and firm handshakes, answered questions with surprising clarity, and never bragged, not even when they had every reason to. They worked together effortlessly, finishing each other's sentences or silently taking over each other's equations when one paused to think. The principal bragged about them at meetings. Teachers mentioned them in the staff lounge with glowing praise. Even parents who barely followed school activities found themselves talking about the Lawson boys on the car ride home. But for the students, it was the robotics competition that changed everything. The twins entered the regional contest with a delicate machine they built from scrap metal and leftover parts from old school projects. A miniature search and rescue robot they named Echo. When it rolled across the stage, lifting obstacles with a tiny mechanical arm and navigating the course with near-perfect precision, the judges' jaws dropped. Echo won first place. Not just by a little, by a landslide. The applause that shook the auditorium that day was the loudest anyone could remember for two middle school boys. Linden Heights Academy plastered their photograph in the school newsletter, the local paper wrote a feature about their talent, and the robotics club exploded with new applications from inspired students. Everyone was proud. Everyone except Andrew Charles. 4 years, Andrew had been the school's golden boy. Top grades, first in every contest, a last name whispered with admiration. His parents, especially his father, carried that pride like a crown. They reminded him often, sometimes too often, that maintaining his position wasn't just an achievement. It was a duty. But the moment the Lawson twins walked into the school, Andrew's name began to slip down the academic rankings, little by little, like sand from a torn bag. First he became second. Then, painfully, he became third. It was the first time in his life Andrew had ever been anything other than number one. He tried harder, studied longer, slept less. But the twins didn't just excel, they soared. And they did it with a quiet grace that made their success even harder to resent. Even the students who once idolized Andrew found themselves turning toward the twins with admiration. Andrew felt himself becoming smaller in a place where he was once the center. His father noticed. Mr. Charles was a man shaped by long hours at sea, stern, weathered, and used to controlling everything from stormy waves to faulty engines. But underneath that sternness was something darker. Something he never admitted out loud, a prejudice he believed he had buried years ago. Yet prejudice is not like a stone you can push underground and forget. It is more like a seed, waiting for the right soil to take root. And the twins' success, that was the soil. "They don't belong here," he muttered one afternoon at the dock, his voice low but trembling with restrained bitterness. Two fellow sailors, Ray and Thompson, were scrubbing barnacles from the side of a boat when he said it. They looked up, confused. "What are you talking about, Charles?" Ray asked. "Those kids. They're just smart. You should be proud the school has talent like that." But Mr. Charles didn't smile. His face hardened. "They're taking everything from my son. Everything he worked for. Everything we built. And everyone acts like it's all fine. Like he's supposed to just step aside. For them." He didn't say the word black, but the sailors heard it anyway, hidden within the venom of them. Thompson shook his head and chuckled. "You're overthinking it. Kids come and go. Let Andrew relax a bit. Ain't nothing wrong with a little competition." But Mr. Charles wasn't listening. His jaw was set, his eyes staring out at the water as if it were the twins' fault the waves kept moving. He wiped his hands on his work pants, pacing in slow, tense steps. "Those boys," he repeated softly, "shouldn't be at the top. Not over my Andrew." Ray exchanged a glance with Thompson. They both shrugged it off. Sailors complain all the time. About weather, about bosses, about everything. They assumed this was no different. They didn't notice the way Mr. Charles's fingers curled into fists. They didn't notice the tremor in his voice. They didn't notice the way his eyes darkened, growing colder with every passing second. They didn't notice the hatred blooming. Hatred that hadn't existed before the twins arrived. Hatred that grew sharper each time their names were spoken with praise. Hatred that would soon drag two innocent boys into the darkest chapter of their lives. Because hatred, once planted, does not stay buried. It grows. It festers. It demands an outlet. And Mr. Charles was already imagining one. The long-awaited school break arrived like a breath of fresh air for the Lawson twins. David and Daniel had worked tirelessly through the term, earning awards, top grades, and admiration. Their parents, proud and eager to give them something memorable, agreed to a small celebration, a boat cruise along the gentle stretch of Blue Water Bay. It was supposed to be a reward. A simple adventure. Nothing more. The twins could barely contain their excitement. They packed the night before, filling a modest black suitcase with 2 identical journals, each decorated with stickers of stars and gears, an homage to their love for robotics. They planned to write everything down: the shape of the waves, the hum of the engine, the feeling of drifting away from shore for the first time. "This is going to be the best day ever," David said as he locked the suitcase with a tiny brass key. "Not just the best," Daniel corrected. "A memory we'll keep forever." Their mother kissed their foreheads the next morning, brushing lint off their shirts. Their father snapped a picture of them beside the car, their suitcase between them, their smiles wide and bright. No one imagined how fragile that moment truly was. At the dock, the air smelled of salt and diesel. Gulls wheeled overhead, screeching as if arguing about the scraps fishermen tossed into the water. Boats bobbed against their moorings, each one painted in shades of peeling blue or chipped white. The twins walked hand in hand at first, then broke into a half-run when they recognized the area from previous family visits. But halfway down the pier, their steps slowed. Standing beside the cruise boat, wearing his sailor's cap and a stiff expression, was Mr. Charles. The moment felt strange, as though something unseen shifted in the air. David's grip tightened on the suitcase handle. Daniel swallowed softly, glancing at his brother. They didn't fear Mr. Charles, but they remembered the way Andrew glared at them in school. They remembered overhearing whispers about how unhappy Mr. Charles was with their achievements. Children notice more than adults think. Still, the twins were polite by nature. They approached with the quiet respect their parents taught them. "Good morning, sir," David said. Mr. Charles didn't smile. His eyes scanned the twins like someone inspecting an unwanted stain. But then, as if remembering he was at work, he forced a thin-lipped grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning," he said curtly. "You're taking the 1-hour cruise?" "Yes, sir," Daniel replied, trying to sound cheerful. Mr. Charles nodded without warmth. "Fine. Let's get you ready." He walked toward a metal rack filled with life jackets. The rack held dozens, some new, some old, some recently replaced. But instead of handing them the clean, brightly colored jackets from the front row, he reached behind them and pulled out 2 faded, sun-damaged, threadbare vests. They looked wrong. The foam inside seemed uneven, like it had rotted. Straps dangled loosely, frayed and thin. Yellowed stains covered the fabric. They looked like relics from another decade. He held them out. "Put these on." The twins exchanged uneasy glances. "Sir," David said slowly, "those look old. Are they still safe?" Without warning, Mr. Charles's face tightened. "They're perfectly fine," he snapped. "Do I look like I don't know my own equipment?" Daniel instinctively stepped back, taken aback by the sharpness in his voice. We saw newer ones on the rack," he murmured. Mr. Charles leaned forward slightly, his eyes cold as steel. "I said they're fine. Now get in the boat." The words hit with the force of a command, not a suggestion. The twins hesitated, but fear of confrontation pushed them into silence. They slipped the faded jackets over their shoulders. They felt wrong immediately. Too light, too loose, too unreliable. Daniel tugged at his strap, which barely tightened. Meanwhile, Mr. Charles turned back to the rack and picked up a brand-new, bright red life jacket for himself. The material glistened, stiff and fresh. The safety tags still hung from the zipper. Without shame, without explanation, he strapped it on tightly across his chest. "You're lucky," he said sharply, checking the buckles. "Not everyone gets a cruise today. Let's go." David and Daniel climbed into the boat. Their suitcase rested between them, safe and dry. The water lapped softly against the hull, as if unaware of the tension simmering in the air. Mr. Charles climbed aboard last, untying the rope with practiced efficiency. His movements were calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that felt unnatural, like something was being hidden beneath it. As the engine rumbled to life and the boat drifted from shore, the twins exchanged a look, an unspoken one, the kind they'd shared their whole lives. Something felt wrong, but neither of them said it aloud. Because they believed today was meant to be special. They believed adults were supposed to keep children safe. They believed life jackets were meant to protect. They believed boats were meant to bring people back. In the gentle rocking of the waves, they held on to those beliefs, never imagining they were about to be shattered. The boat pulled away from the dock with a slow, steady rumble, cutting through the calm waters of Blue Water Bay. The sky was a gentle blue dome above them, streaked with wisps of white cloud. A light breeze carried the faint scent of salt and seaweed, and for a moment, just a moment, the twins allowed themselves to relax. Maybe everything would be fine. Maybe they were just overthinking. But deep down, both boys felt something heavy pressing on their chests, a silent warning they didn't yet know how to interpret. David shifted in his seat, tugging again at the loose strap of his life vest. The fabric scraped rough against his neck, and the sensation made him uneasy. Daniel's vest wasn't any better. One strap had already slipped out of its loop, hanging like a loose thread waiting to fall apart. Still, the water was calm. The sun was soft. Everything looked peaceful on the surface. Daniel forced a smile and pointed at a distant cluster of seabirds diving for fish. "Look, they're hunting." David nodded, but his mind wasn't on the birds. His eyes kept drifting toward the life jackets hanging on the wall inside the cabin. Clean, bright, and new. A dozen of them, all untouched. All the jackets Mr. Charles chose not to give them. A quiet knot tightened in his stomach. He reached down, opened the black suitcase between them, and pulled out his leather-bound journal, the one his parents bought him as a reward for winning the robotics competition. He clicked his pen, opened to the first page, and hesitated. Should he write it? Would it matter? Something, instinct, fear, truth, pushed the pen forward. With sharp, heavy strokes, he wrote, "I think Mr. Charles doesn't like U.S. He gave U.S. bad life jackets that can't float U.S., and he refused to change them when we complained." The letters were bold, uneven, almost carved into the page more than written on it. David stared at the words for a long time, his throat tightening. He wasn't accusing. He wasn't trying to stir trouble. He was simply recording what happened, because something inside him told him it mattered. Daniel glanced at the page, then at his brother. He didn't say anything, but his eyes softened with a mixture of fear and agreement. David closed the journal gently, slipped it back into the suitcase, and locked it. The metallic click sounded much louder than it should have. On the other side of the boat, Mr. Charles noticed. He wasn't looking directly at them, but the way his gaze slid sideways, flicking quickly toward the brown suitcase before shifting back to the controls, made the twins' skin prickle. The expression on his face didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The boat picked up slightly more speed. The water stretched out endlessly ahead of them, glimmering in the sunlight. The shore grew smaller, fading into the distance behind them until houses, boats, and docks dissolved into a faint blur. They were now heading toward the deepest part of Blue Water Bay, a place sailors talked about in half-jokes and half-warnings, a place known for undercurrents strong enough to drag down even the sturdiest swimmer. Daniel's fingers curled around the edge of the seat. "How far are we going?" "Far enough to see the best view," Mr. Charles answered without looking at them. His voice was calm. Too calm. The twins exchanged another silent glance. That same knot of dread twisted again, tightening in both their stomachs. The boat continued deeper, deeper, deeper. The surface of the water darkened to a deeper blue, almost black in places. The waves changed, still calm, but moving differently, swirling in slow, powerful motions that hinted at the wild force beneath. David couldn't shake the feeling that the sea itself knew something was wrong. Mr. Charles stood firm at the wheel, his shoulders squared, his jaw set. The sunlight bounced off his brand-new life jacket, the bright red color almost mocking the faded brown-gray vests the boys wore. Every now and then, he glanced over his shoulder, not at the boys, but at their life jackets, as if checking whether they were still strapped on. Or perhaps confirming something. The wind shifted slightly, bringing with it a chill that didn't belong on a warm day. Daniel rubbed his arms. "Why does it feel colder out here?" No one answered. Ahead of them, a stretch of water shimmered strangely, like the sunlight was hitting it at the wrong angle. Mr. Charles adjusted the wheel, steering not around it, but directly into it. David's eyes narrowed. "Sir? We're kind of far now." Mr. Charles didn't turn. "This is the best view." But his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. And when he spoke, his voice carried no joy, no enthusiasm, only a rigid, unsettling resolve. Daniel watched him with growing unease. Are we supposed to go this deep?" "Yes," Mr. Charles said sharply. "Don't ask again." His tone sliced through the air. A few more minutes passed. The boat hummed along steadily, until suddenly, without warning, Mr. Charles twisted the wheel sharply to the right. The entire boat lurched. Water slapped violently against the hull. The twins grabbed the sides to keep from tumbling over. "Sir!" David shouted. Another jerk of the wheel, harder this time. The boat tilted dangerously to the left. Daniel's breath hitched. "Stop! You'll tip it! Sit still!" Mr. Charles barked. But he didn't slow down, didn't steady the wheel, didn't correct the motion. Instead, he steered the boat into an erratic zigzag pattern, slicing through waters so deep the sunlight barely touched the sand below. The twins began sliding across their seats, their weak life jackets shifting loosely around them. A wave rose. The bow lifted. The boat slammed back down. David's heart thundered in his chest. Daniel's hands trembled as they gripped the seat. Something was terribly wrong. Mr. Charles wasn't navigating. He wasn't losing control. He was doing this on purpose. The boat rocked again, harder than before. David knew. Daniel knew. And somewhere beneath the waves, the deep ocean waited. A final, brutal jerk of the wheel caused the world to shift sideways. The boat flipped. Cold water swallowed them instantly, the shock stealing their breath. The ocean closed over their heads, dark and heavy. David felt himself thrown underwater, tumbling blindly, disoriented. His life jacket rose around him uselessly, the straps sliding off his small shoulders. Panic shot through his chest like lightning. He kicked upward desperately. When he broke through the surface, he gasped violently, choking on salt water. Daniel surfaced beside him, flailing, eyes wide with terror. "Help! Please!" Daniel screamed, voice cracking as the waves slapped against them. But Mr. Charles wasn't beside them. He wasn't under water. He was 20 feet away, floating calmly in his bright red life jacket, the strap perfectly secure across his chest. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't swimming toward the twins. He was simply watching. David felt the coldness of that stare deeper than the ocean that surrounded him. "Sir, help us! Please!" he begged. Daniel's voice broke into sobs as he tried to stay afloat. His vest dipped, sinking more than floating, dragging him down with its weight. The waves slapped them again, pushing them apart, pulling them back. "We can't swim," Daniel choked out. I know you can't," Mr. Charles murmured under his breath. The words were carried away by the wind, unheard by the boys, but spoken with chilling ease. The twins' limbs thrashed in the water. Their breaths came in ragged gasps. Their small bodies struggled against the heavy undercurrent pulling at their legs. Each time they tried to lift their heads above the surface, water filled their mouths. "Please!" David screamed again. But Mr. Charles only adjusted his life jacket as though settling in for a long wait. The ocean roared quietly around them. Another wave crashed over Daniel, dragging him under. He resurfaced for a moment, arms flailing, eyes wide, fear carved across his face. "David!" he gasped. David reached for him, fingertips brushing his brother's arm, but the current pulled Daniel away again. Mr. Charles watched with a blank expression. A sailor for decades, he knew these waters better than anyone. He knew exactly how long it would take. He knew exactly how much strength the boys had left. And he knew that no one would hear them scream out here. Minutes passed like hours. The twins' voices weakened. Their arms trembled. Their bodies sank lower into the water, exhaustion overtaking desperation. Then, from the last fight for air, David disappeared beneath the waves. Daniel's scream tore across the water. It was short, choked, and full of a terror that no child should ever carry. He lasted only seconds longer. When he sank, the ocean swallowed him quietly, almost gently, as though taking them both into an eternal silence. And then there was only one thing left above water: the suitcase. It bobbed to the surface for a few seconds, battered but sealed shut, drifting aimlessly, as if resisting the truth of what had just happened, as if carrying something that desperately wanted to survive. Mr. Charles stared at the floating case for a long moment. Then another wave rose, rolled across the surface, and swallowed it too. When he finally began swimming toward shore, his expression shifted into something practiced, something mournful, broken, believable. He was preparing his performance, and he knew the world would believe him. For now. The sun was slipping behind the horizon by the time Mr. Charles staggered toward the docks, drenched, panting loudly, and stumbling in a performance so dramatic it drew immediate attention. His hair dripped water onto the wooden planks. His bright red life jacket, the one he never took off, clung perfectly around his chest. And though he had just committed the darkest act of his life, he forced his breathing into sloppy gasps to appear as though he had narrowly escaped death itself. "Help!" he rasped, grabbing the railing and doubling over as if he might collapse. "Oh God! Oh God!" 3 sailors ran toward him. Mr. Woods, the oldest among them, Freddie, a young deckhand, and Toffer, a middle-aged mechanic. Their faces twisted in alarm as they scanned the empty space behind him. "Where are the boys?" Mr. Woods demanded immediately, his brows tightening. Mr. Charles dropped to his knees. "The boat! Something was wrong with it," he stuttered, voice shaking in a way that sounded almost rehearsed. He covered his face with both hands. "It malfunctioned. The waves were too strong. They went under." Freddie froze. What? The twins? Mr. Charles nodded violently, adding a sob for effect. I tried everything. I tried to pull them up, but... He broke his sentence with a dramatic cough. I almost died out there too. The whole thing tipped. The boat just flipped. His voice wavered pathetically, but not a single tear fell. His eyes were dry, only wide with a staged horror meant to distract from the truth buried behind them. Toffer placed a hand on his shoulder. Calm down, Charles. You're safe now. But the boys, did you see where they went under? Mr. Charles shook his head, pressing a hand to his forehead as though trying to block out the memory. No, no. Everything happened so fast. The water was dark. I couldn't see them. I couldn't reach them. The crowd forming on the dock watched him with pity. Sailors muttered, voices low, shocked. Word spread quickly. Someone sprinted toward town to alert the authorities. Others searched the horizon, hoping to see a floating head, an arm, anything. But the ocean remained calm and indifferent, hiding everything it knew beneath its widening shadows. Within an hour, emergency services arrived. Coast guards, divers, searchlights. The boat's remains were later found floating upside down, just as he'd planned. Nothing else. By nightfall, the small coastal town buzzed with grief and disbelief. Everyone knew the twins, the brilliant boys who had broken every academic record at their school, who had made teachers giddy with pride, who had made neighbors smile simply by existing. The news hit the community like a violent wave. Their mother arrived first. She sprinted down the dock before anyone could stop her. Her legs trembled with a dread that seemed to consume the air around her. "Where are my boys?" she demanded, searching every face, every shadow. Mr. Charles lowered his eyes, schooling his expression into something softer, more mournful. I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice thick but still dry. "It happened so fast. I tried to save them." The words barely left his mouth when the twins' mother collapsed in a scream so raw it pierced every soul present. She crumpled to her knees, hitting the wooden planks with her palms, calling her sons' names into the unresponsive ocean. Her wail echoed across the water. The twins' father arrived moments later, sprinting with desperation. When he saw the empty space where his son should have been, his strength evaporated. He stumbled forward, leaning over the railing, staring into the dark waves as if expecting his sons to rise with the tide. Then he bellowed into the ocean, anger, pain, disbelief, all tangled into a sound that made the dock tremble beneath everyone's feet. Divers worked tirelessly throughout the night. Searchlights cut across the water. Boats combed every direction. The next day, helicopters joined the search. Every time someone spotted debris or an object floating, hearts stopped, only to be followed by disappointment. No bodies. No life jackets. No suitcase. Nothing. The days blurred together. The ocean held its secrets tightly, refusing to give back what it had taken. By the end of the fourth day, the Coast Guard briefed the twins' parents quietly, gently, too gently. "We think they were pulled into an undercurrent. We believe they didn't make it." The mother sobbed into her husband's chest. The father stared blankly at the floor, a man hollowed out by grief. Authorities declared it a tragic accident. And just like that, the case was closed. Memorials appeared everywhere. At their school, students created a wall of messages, photos, and flowers. At the church, candles lined the altar. The robotics lab placed their trophies in a glass display with black ribbons tied around them. On the fifth evening, the entire town gathered by the shore. Hundreds of people formed a circle, holding candles whose reflections danced on the water. A choir sang softly. Teachers cried openly. Students held on to their parents. Mr. Charles stood among them. He bowed his head like the rest, pretending to mourn, pretending to grieve, pretending he hadn't been the last face the boys saw as they drowned. But hidden behind his lowered gaze was a tightness in his jaw, a paranoia, a sliver of fear that clenched at his chest every time someone looked at him for too long. Especially Mr. Woods. The old sailor had watched him carefully from the moment he arrived back at the dock. He'd seen plenty of true panic in his decades on the sea, and something about the way Mr. Charles performed grief had rubbed against every instinct honed by years of facing storms, accidents, and genuine desperation. On the sixth morning, while Mr. Charles stood quietly near the boats pretending to assist with search cleanup, Mr. Woods approached him. He spoke softly, so no one else could hear. "Charles," he murmured, leaning close, "something about your story doesn't feel right." Mr. Charles froze. "Boats don't flip themselves in calm water," Mr. Woods continued. "And you're a stronger swimmer than anyone in this dock. And those boys, they should have floated, not sunk." Mr. Charles forced a shaky frown. "Woods, you think I wanted this? You think I wouldn't give anything to bring those boys back?" Mr. Woods didn't smile. "I think the ocean tells the truth eventually." He walked away. And for the first time since the twins disappeared, real fear, not guilt, gripped Mr. Charles's throat. Because he knew something Mr. Woods didn't. The ocean would tell the truth. It just wouldn't be today. It would be 2 years from now. 2 years passed, yet the wound never closed. The twins' parents moved through life like shadows of the people they once were. Therapy sessions became their weekly ritual, each appointment peeling open grief that never seemed to heal. Some days the mother couldn't speak at all. She simply cried while the therapist watched with sympathetic eyes. The father tried to be strong, but even he would sometimes break mid-sentence, whispering, "They were only children. They were only children." Their home remained frozen in time. 2 untouched beds, 2 backpacks still hanging by the door, 2 pairs of sneakers that would never be worn again. The world moved on, but they remained stuck. Meanwhile, at the school, Andrew Charles walked the hallways with a strange heaviness. He was proud to be top of the class again, yet everyone knew the crown felt poisoned. His classmates rarely congratulated him. They only whispered, "Those twins were better. His dad was the sailor that day, right? I heard Andrew cried after the memorial." Andrew heard all of it. But the worst was the voice in his own head. Dad hated them. Dad hated them so much. He tried for 2 years to push the thought away, but it clung to him like a stain. He felt it every time he looked at his father's face. Every time he remembered how cold his father had been toward the twins. Every time he remembered the strange way his father kept repeating the same story, word for word, whenever the accident came up. Deep down, Andrew feared the truth. He just didn't know how to face it. Then, one morning, long before the sun had fully risen, the sea finally exhaled a secret it had held for too long. A jogger named Lucas ran along his usual route by the shore. He loved the quiet of dawn, the smell of salt, the soft hiss of small waves pushing against the sand. But on this morning, something unusual caught his eye. A dark object lay half-buried where the tide had pulled back, rectangular, heavy, and covered in barnacles. Lucas slowed, confused. It was a suitcase. A waterproof one. He dragged it up onto the dry sand and set it upright. It wasn't locked anymore. The ocean had loosened the latch. With hesitant curiosity, he opened it. Inside lay items that should have been lost forever. A robotics medal, still shining with the engraved names, David and Daniel. A pair of small, neatly folded shirts. And 2 journals. One leather-bound, one spiral. Both perfectly dry. His heart pounded as he reached for the leather one, the bigger one. He opened the first page. He froze. The page screamed with a message written in thick, smeared black ink. "Mr. Charles doesn't like U.S. He gave U.S. bad life jackets that can't float U.S. and refused to change them." Lucas's blood ran cold. He stumbled backward, nearly dropping the journal. This wasn't a lost item. This was evidence. Within minutes, he was calling the police, voice shaking as he tried to explain what he found. Officers arrived in disbelief, lifting the dry pages with gloved hands. Every word stood clear. Every accusation was alive. "This changes everything," one detective whispered. "Because this wasn't an accident anymore. This was a homicide." The discovery spread through town like wildfire. News vans gathered. Reporters whispered. People who once accepted the tragedy now felt something electric in their veins. Anger, suspicion, fear. The authorities reopened the case immediately. Mr. Charles was called in for questioning at the station. He sat with his arms folded tightly, jaw clenched, eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route. Detective Harris slid the journal across the table. This was written by one of the twins on the day of the cruise. Mr. Charles barely glanced at it before scoffing. Children write dramatic things all the time. They were probably scared of the ocean. Who knows? Kids exaggerate. Detective Harris leaned forward. "They wrote that you intentionally gave them bad life jackets." Mr. Charles snapped. "They were old, yes, but still functional. And you refused to change them. They were overreacting. They always were." The detective's stare hardened. A 7-year-old doesn't lie about something like this before drowning. Silence pressed against the room. For the first time, Mr. Charles swallowed nervously. But then he shook his head again. It was an accident. Nothing more. The next day, as investigators continued pulling old reports, logs, and weather data, a familiar figure walked into the station. Mr. Woods. His weathered hands rested on the counter as he said, "I have something to tell you." Detectives took him into a private room. He inhaled deeply, his old sailor lungs heavy. "I wasn't honest 2 years ago. I should have come forward earlier. But I didn't want to accuse a man without proof. But I heard him, Charles, several times." "What did he say?" a detective asked. Mr. Woods looked down at the table, then spoke slowly. He said, more than once, that he didn't like those boys. Said they were taking something from his son. One day he said, his voice cracked. He forced the words out. "Those boys don't belong here." The detectives exchanged glances. Woods exhaled shakily. "I didn't understand the hate back then. Now I do." As Woods left, another sailor walked in. Freddie, the young deckhand. He was pale, shaking slightly. I was there that day too," he said. "I didn't want to get involved, but I heard him. Charles said the boys were making his son look weak. He said they were a problem." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't think he'd do something. I swear I didn't." The detectives noted every word, every detail, every confession. Then came the final piece. Investigators dug through archived marine data. A specialist reviewed it carefully before stepping into the briefing room. "On the day the twins drowned," she said, "the waters were calm, very calm. No wind spikes, no undercurrents, no storms, nothing that could flip a boat." She tapped the paper lightly. "Not naturally, at least. No one spoke. No one needed to. Everything pointed in one direction now. The diary, the weather, the witness statements, the timing, the motive, the hatred." The silence that followed this revelation in the station was thick, like they all knew the ghost of that day was standing in the room with them. And somewhere across town, unaware that the walls of lies around him were collapsing, Mr. Charles sat in his living room, sipping tea with hands that shook. Because deep down, he knew something was coming. And this time, he couldn't swim away from it. The interrogation room was silent except for the faint buzz of the ceiling light. Mr. Charles sat in the metal chair, hands shaking despite the false calm he tried to project. His hair was grayer, his face more drained, yet something in his eyes still flickered with denial, or perhaps the last embers of pride desperately trying to survive. Across from him, two detectives placed the waterproof suitcase on the table. The same suitcase he watched sink beneath the waves. They clicked open the latches slowly, deliberately. The robotics metal glinted under the light. The dry journal sat neatly on top, as though time had neglected to tarnish it simply out of respect for the boys whose dreams had been trapped inside it. Detective Morales opened to the first page. The bold handwriting stared up like a scream frozen in ink. Mr. Charles gave U.S. bad life jackets. He refused to change them. Mr. Charles swallowed hard. A twitch crawled across his jawline. "You expect us," Detective Morales said quietly, "to believe two gentle, brilliant boys, who trusted every adult, would write something like this unless they were terrified?" Mr. Charles's voice cracked. Defended himself again as he did earlier. "Children exaggerate. They worry over nothing. They—" Detective Ramos slammed her palm onto the table. "Stop lying." The sound echoed through the room, bouncing off metal and concrete. "You said the waves were strong." She tossed a photo across the table. "But weather data shows the ocean was flat that day. No currents. No storms. Nothing." Another photo slid across, the calm horizon captured by a security camera from the dock. "Mr. Charles," she continued, voice lower, tighter, "why were only the cheap, unsafe life jackets used? When better ones were available?" He looked at the photo, then at the journal. His lip trembled, but he stayed silent. Then the door opened. Mr. Woods walked in, older now, with deepened wrinkles and tired eyes. Behind him, another sailor followed, removing his cap respectfully. Detective Morales gestured to them. "We asked two of your colleagues to confirm something." Mr. Woods stepped forward. "You talked about those boys for months," he said quietly. "About how they didn't belong here. How they were taking the spotlight from your son. You said it more than once. I tried to laugh it off, tried to ignore it, but I knew something was wrong the day you came back alone." The second sailor nodded, nervous but determined. "I was there that afternoon. You said, 'Those boys are ruining everything for Andrew.' Your face. I've never forgotten the way you said it." Mr. Charles gripped the metal armrests so hard that his knuckles went white. Detective Ramos folded her arms. "So we have the journal, the weather data, two witnesses, and the fact you were the only survivor, wearing the only safe life jacket." She leaned in, eyes fixed on him. "Tell us the truth." Silence pressed into the room like thick fog. Minutes passed. Then, like a fault line snapping deep underground, something inside Mr. Charles broke. He slammed his palm on the table. "They ruined my son's life." His voice shook with rage and desperation. "They took everything from him. He was the top of his class, the pride of the school. And then those boys arrived. Perfect, brilliant, loved by everyone." His breathing became erratic. Teachers comparing him to them, parents praising them, my wife asking me why Andrew wasn't as good anymore. He clutched his head, fingers digging into his scalp. "They didn't even belong here," he screamed. "This was our school, our community." And suddenly Andrew was invisible. Detective Morales stared at him with cold disgust. "So you killed them?" He didn't deny it this time. He looked up, eyes glassy. "I didn't plan it," he whispered. "But when I saw them getting on my boat, when I saw the cheap life jacket sitting there, something in me said this was my chance. A way to fix things. A way to protect my boy." His voice lowered, hollow. "I steered us into the deep. I tilted the boat. I watched them struggle." A tear rolled down at last. Real, but twisted. "I swear I didn't think it would be that fast. I thought maybe one would survive. or that something would stop me. Detective Ramos stepped back, revolted. "They begged you," she said softly. "Didn't they?" He closed his eyes. "They called my name, but I told myself it was too late to go back, too late to undo it. I swam away." The door burst open. The twins' parents stood there, both shaking, both pale as ash. Officers tried to restrain them, but the detectives allowed them in under supervision. The twins' mother let out a sound that barely qualified as human, a mix of heartbreak and fury. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at the man who had stolen everything from her. Their father approached with clenched fists, breathing heavily. "You murdered my sons," he growled. "And you dare talk about protecting your boy?" Mr. Charles looked up slowly, the last of his bravado crumbling. "I thought," he swallowed, "I thought I was protecting my son." The twins' father lunged, rage consuming him. "You killed ours." Officers grabbed him just in time, pulling him back as he fought wildly, desperate to land even one blow on the man who drowned his children. Detective Morales stepped between them. "Stop! Let the court handle him." But the heartbreak in the room was suffocating, so thick it felt like the walls themselves were grieving. The courtroom filled beyond capacity. Reporters, neighbors, students, sailors, old friends, former teachers. Everyone wanted to see the man who murdered brilliance and innocence. Andrew Charles sat alone in the front row, shoulders hunched, face red and swollen from crying. The truth had crushed him. Every bit of admiration he ever had for his father had turned into something sickening. When Mr. Charles was led in wearing cuffs, Andrew stood up trembling. "You did this for me?" he sobbed. "For me. I never wanted this. I never wanted them to die." Mr. Charles reached a cuffed hand toward him. "Son!" Andrew staggered backward, shaking violently. "Don't call me that. Don't ever call me that again." The courtroom murmured. The community watched. The judge listened. And when Mr. Charles's confession was played aloud, no one breathed. The judge delivered the verdict with a heavy voice. For the murder of 2 children, and for the deliberate act of hate and malice that took their lives, this court sentences you to death by hanging. A gasp rippled through the room, followed by a wave of murmured voices, some relieved, some stunned. Mr. Charles lifted his head. He stared at the twins' parents. His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." Their father's eyes were stone. "You're sorry now?" You watched them drown. Silence fell. And in that moment, justice, heavy, painful, but necessary, finally began its long journey back to the family that had lost everything. 2 brilliant boys. 2 shattered parents. And now, a town witnessing the fall of the man who thought hate was justified. The courtroom doors closed slowly behind the guards leading Mr. Charles away. And for the first time in 2 years, the truth was finally free. In the weeks that followed, the town began rebuilding the parts of itself that had been shattered. People approached the twins' parents with gentle condolences, bringing food, offering rides, sending letters. Some apologized for believing the deaths were accidents. Others admitted they had always suspected more but never had proof. Every conversation reopened the wound, but it also reminded them they weren't alone. When the day for the execution finally arrived, the twins' parents didn't attend. They chose a different kind of closure. Instead, they rose before sunrise and carried 2 baskets filled with fresh white rose petals, David and Daniel's favorite flower. Roses had always been the boys' symbol of beauty and peace. The twins used to pluck petals and float them in buckets of water, pretending the petals were tiny boats carrying messages of hope. At the beach, the sky was soft pink and lavender, the ocean a long stretch of shimmering silver. The water moved gently, as if the sea itself had slowed its breathing to welcome them. The twins' mother stepped to the shoreline, removed her shoes, and let the water touch her toes. Tears welled quietly as she whispered both boys' names into the wind, David. Daniel. The words trembled out of her like broken music. Their father stepped beside her, holding a handful of petals. He closed his eyes, remembering the boys' laughter, their matching backpacks, the way their small hands used to grip his fingers when crossing the street. He remembered how proud he was when they won the robotics competition, how their faces glowed when they talked about their dreams. Together, the parents gently scattered the rose petals across the surface of the ocean. The petals drifted forward slowly, carried by calm waves, glowing in the rising sunlight. Each petal felt like a piece of the boys, soft, pure, cherished. The twins' mother whispered, voice cracking, "Rest now, my sons. The world knows the truth." The twins' father murmured, "We will carry you always." For the first time in 2 years, their grief didn't feel like a weight dragging them underwater. It felt like something lifting, pain still present, but grief finally moving with purpose instead of suffocating them. The town decided to honor the boys properly. A special memorial was built in the community center, a glass case placed at the entrance hall. Inside the case lay the waterproof suitcase that had washed ashore, the very suitcase that brought Justice back from the bottom of the sea. Next to it sat the twins' robotics medal, polished until it gleamed. And beside that, copies of their smiling photographs, their eyes bright, their hope intact. The suitcase became more than an artifact. It became a symbol of truth waiting to be found, a symbol of innocence stolen, a symbol of justice rising from the depths. Every child who walked past it stopped and stared. Every parent paused longer than they expected. Teachers used it to teach students about courage and honesty. Sailors touched the glass as they entered the hall, whispering prayers for the boys before heading back to the sea. The twins' legacy became larger than the tragedy that claimed them. They became a reminder that truth has a way of returning, even from the deepest waters. For the first time in a long time, the twins' parents slept without nightmares. The ocean no longer looked like the monster that stole their children. Now it looked like a place where their sons could finally rest in peace. Justice had been served, and healing, though slow, had finally begun.